You know that guy in the Lambo flexing on Instagram about his crypto millions? Yeah, there's a good chance he's broke. Meanwhile, the wealthiest person in your neighborhood probably drives a Toyota and lives in a modest house. But here's what's really going to blow your mind. Some of the richest people you know might be just a few missed paychecks away from financial disaster. What gives? Well, there's a crucial difference between being rich and being wealthy that most people completely miss, and getting it wrong could cost you everything. Want to know the craziest part? The gap between rich and wealthy is bigger now than it's ever been, and what I'm about to share might completely change how you think about money. See, we've all been trained to think wealth equals fancy cars, designer clothes, and living large. Social media has only made this worse. Now we're bombarded 24/7 with images of successful people showing off their latest purchases. But have you ever wondered why some people who seem to have it all suddenly go broke? Or why others with seemingly modest lifestyles never seem worried about money? Here's what nobody talks about. According to recent data, nearly 60% of Americans making over $250,000 a year are still living paycheck to paycheck. Think about that for a second. $250,000 a year, and they're still one emergency away from financial trouble. How is that even possible? And before you think, oh, that's just bad money management, there's actually something much bigger going on here. Something that explains why lottery winners often end up broke, why professional athletes can go from million-dollar contracts to bankruptcy, and why some janitors die as secret millionaires. So it's time to learn how money works to understand the critical difference between being rich and wealthy, and more importantly, which one you should actually aim for. Because trust me, getting this wrong could be the biggest financial mistake of your life. The first key difference between being rich and wealthy is that being rich is about income, while being wealthy is about assets. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't a high income the key to building assets? Well, not exactly, and this is where things get interesting. Think of it like this. Being rich is like having a really big bucket of water, while being wealthy is like owning the well. Sure, that bucket might look impressive right now, but what happens when it springs a leak? Or worse, what happens when someone stops filling it? Let me give you a real-world example that might surprise you. According to a recent Charles Schwab survey, Americans believe you need about $2,500,000 to be considered wealthy. But here's the kicker. Many people earning enough to accumulate that much never do. Why? Because they're stuck in what I call the rich trap. The rich trap is simple. As income goes up, lifestyle inflation follows. You get the promotion, you buy the bigger house, land the bonus, you get the fancier car. Before you know it, you're earning more than 95% of Americans, but still struggling to save anything meaningful. Sound familiar? But that's just the beginning. Wait until you hear about the second major difference between rich and wealthy, and why it explains how some people can be worth millions while barely earning a salary. The second major difference between rich and wealthy comes down to one word: sustainability. And this is where things get really interesting. A rich person needs to keep working to maintain their lifestyle. A wealthy person, their money works for them. Let me show you what I mean with some numbers that might shock you. Let's say you earn $300,000 a year. Pretty rich by most standards, right? But after taxes, a nice house in a good area, private school for the kids, and keeping up with the rich lifestyle, you might only be saving 5–10% of that income. One job loss, one medical emergency, or one bad investment, and it all comes crashing down. Now contrast that with someone who earns $100,000 a year, but lives well below their means and invests wisely. After 20 years of consistent investing and compound interest, they could easily have a portfolio generating more passive income than our rich friend's salary. That's wealth. Want a real-world example? Look at Warren Buffett, worth billions, still lives in the same house he bought in 1958 for $31,500. Meanwhile, let me tell you about what happened to Mike Tyson. At his peak, Tyson earned over $300 million in the ring. But by 2003, he was bankrupt. The difference? One understood wealth, the other just knew how to be rich. But here's where it gets even more fascinating, and this leads us to our third major difference between rich and wealthy. The third difference is about control, and this is where most people get it completely backwards. You see, many rich people are actually trapped by their lifestyle. Big house means big mortgage, fancy car means big payments, private school means huge tuition bills. They're stuck on what I call the golden hamster wheel. running faster and faster just to stay in the same place. But wealthy people, they have something far more valuable than material possessions. They have options. They can choose to work or not work. They can take risks because they have a safety net. They can say no to things they don't want to do because they're not dependent on their next paycheck. Think about that for a second. How would your life be different if you never had to worry about money again? Not because you have unlimited funds to spend, but because you have enough assets generating income to cover your needs? Let me tell you about Ronald Reed, a janitor who amassed $8 million by living modestly and investing wisely. Nobody knew he was a millionaire until he died. His secret? He understood the difference between rich and wealthy. He chose wealth over appearing rich. Compare that to all those rich influencers who rent private jets for Instagram photos, then go home to their shared apartments. You might be thinking, well, they're young, they have time to build wealth. But here's the problem. They're teaching millions of followers that looking rich is more important than being wealthy. Now you might be wondering, okay, I get the difference, but how do I actually become wealthy instead of just rich? Well, this is where things get practical, and I'm going to show you some patterns that might surprise you. The first pattern you'll notice among wealthy people is their relationship with assets. While rich people buy liabilities they think are assets, like expensive cars that depreciate, wealthy people buy actual assets that generate income. And here's the crazy part. You don't need to be rich to start building wealth. Let me give you an example that blew my mind. According to Federal Reserve data, the average millionaire has 80% of their wealth in boring, unsexy investments like index funds and rental properties. Not crypto, not NFTs, not even individual stocks, just steady, reliable assets that grow over time. But wait, you might be thinking, don't I need a high income to invest like that? Actually, no. And this leads us to the second pattern. Wealthy people focus on their savings rate, not their income rate. Think about it this way. If you earn $50,000 and save 30%, you're building more wealth than someone earning $200,000 and saving 5%. Laughs math doesn't care about your Instagram followers. Now, here's where things get really interesting for 2025. We're seeing a massive shift in how wealth is built and maintained. The traditional path of get a good job, save for 40 years, retire, is becoming obsolete faster than a 2020 TikTok dance. Why? Because we're living in an age where assets can multiply or evaporate overnight. Just look at what happened to all those rich crypto bros from 2021. One day they're buying Lambos, the next they're trying to sell them at a loss. But here's the thing. While the tools and technologies change, the fundamental principles of building wealth haven't. And this is absolutely crucial to understand. The formula for building wealth hasn't changed in centuries. It's still spend less than you earn, invest the difference in income-producing assets. Repeat for a long time. Sounds boring, right? Well, guess what's not boring? Financial freedom. And that's exactly what wealth gives you. So what should you do with this information? First, stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. That influencer with the Lambo, they might be on chapter 1 of a book that ends in bankruptcy. Second, start thinking in terms of assets, not income. Every dollar you earn has the potential to become a wealth-building soldier in your army. Are you sending your dollars out to die in designer boutiques, or are you deploying them to build your financial fortress? Look, at the end of the day, being rich might get you likes on social media, but being wealthy gets you something far more valuable, freedom. And in today's economy, that freedom is worth more than any Lambo. Want to know what's really wild? Some of the wealthiest people I know never earn more than an average salary. How do they do it? Well, that's actually the topic of my next video, how regular people are building million-dollar portfolios. If you want to dive deeper into these wealth-building strategies, I've put together a special report in my free newsletter, link in the description. And trust me, what I share there might completely change how you think about building wealth. And hey, if you found value in this breakdown of rich versus wealthy, smash that like button and subscribe to keep learning how money works. Because in this economy, the difference between rich and wealthy isn't just interesting, it could be the difference between struggling forever and achieving true financial freedom.